Commander stood on the bridge of the massive starship, looking out at Earth below. The blue planet turned slowly in the darkness of space, beautiful and peaceful. She had been in command of humanity's flagship for 3 years now, but the view never got old. Today, however, she felt a knot of worry in her stomach. The year was 2287. Humanity had joined the Galactic Council 15 years ago, right after they invented faster-than-light travel. It seemed like a dream come true at first. The Council was made up of 847 different alien species, all working together. They had technology that seemed like magic. They had been exploring the galaxy for 50,000 years while humans were still living in caves. But dreams don't always turn out the way you expect. Ambassador was at Gateway Station, the huge space station where humans met with aliens. He was waiting for a delegation from the Council. His assistant told him they were coming to discuss something important, something about tribute. Didn't like the sound of that word. The alien delegation arrived right on time. They were led by High Assessor, a tall creature from the Empire. They had ruled the Council for thousands of years. Skin was gray and smooth like stone, and her eyes were completely black. She moved with the confidence of someone who had never been told no. "Ambassador," she said, her voice translated by the computer into perfect Korean. "We come with an official request from the Galactic Council." Gestured for them to sit. There were 5 aliens in total, all from different species. One looked like a giant insect. Another seemed to be made of water held together by some kind of force field. They all looked serious. Placed a data device on the table. Numbers and charts appeared in the air above it. "Every species in the Council must pay tribute," she explained. "This is how we maintain peace and order across the galaxy. Your species has been given time to establish itself. Now you must contribute like everyone else." Read the numbers carefully. His face went pale. 20% of all human industrial output, 30% of rare earth minerals, and 10,000 humans per year for something called cultural integration programs. "What exactly are these integration programs?" asked quietly. One of the other aliens spoke up. His name was difficult to pronounce, so humans called him Delegate. "Selected individuals from your species will live among other Council species. They will learn our ways, serve in various capacities, and help build bridges between cultures." "Will they be allowed to return home?" asked. There was a long pause, finally answered. "Eventually, perhaps, but the program requires a minimum commitment of 20 years. Understood what that meant. These people would essentially be hostages. They would be trained to think like the Council wanted them to think. Many would probably never see Earth again. "And if we refuse?" asked. His expression didn't change. "Then humanity will be expelled from the Council. Your species will be designated as open territory. Any Council member would be free to claim your worlds, take your resources, or enslave your people without consequence. We have laws, Ambassador, but they only protect Council members in good standing." "How long do we have to decide?" 30 days. After the aliens left, immediately contacted Earth. President Minu received the news in his office in New Seoul. He sat quietly for a long time, reading the tribute demands over and over. Then he called an emergency meeting of the Colonial Parliament. Representatives came from all over human space. There were delegates from Earth, Mars, Europa, and the 12 colony worlds humanity had established in the past 15 years. The Parliament chamber was packed with people, and everyone was talking at once. Governor from Mars Colony was the first to speak officially. He was a big man with a loud voice. "Absolutely not," he shouted. "We didn't spend 200 years fighting for our survival just to become slaves to aliens. I say we tell them to go to hell." Director from Europa stood up next. She was much calmer but just as firm. "I've run the numbers," she said. "If we pay this tribute, Earth's economy will collapse within 5 years. Colony expansion will stop completely. will fall decades behind in technology, and that's assuming they don't increase the tribute later, which they probably will. Other representatives had different opinions. Senator from Earth argued that they needed more time. "We've only been in space for a few decades," he said. "The Council has been out here for 50,000 years. We can't fight them. Maybe we should pay the tribute for now and build up our strength." Representative Myra from the Titan colony disagreed. "And how long would that take? How many generations of humans would live as servants while we built up strength? My children would die as slaves so that maybe there could be free." The debate went on for hours. President Minu sat in his chair, listening to every word. He was a thoughtful man who had led humanity through some difficult times. He had been president during the Mars independence crisis and the Europa food riots. He knew how to make hard decisions. Finally, Ambassador was given permission to speak. He explained the cultural integration clause in more detail. The 10,000 humans who would be taken each year would be trained to serve the Council. Some would become soldiers in alien armies. Others would work as laborers on distant worlds. They would be taught that Earth's ways were primitive and that the Council's way was better. Most would never be allowed to return home. "This isn't just tribute," said quietly. "This is the slow destruction of our culture. In 100 years, we won't be humans anymore. We'll be something else, something shaped by the Council to serve their needs." The chamber went silent. Everyone understood what was at stake now. This wasn't just about resources or economics. This was about who humanity would be. President Minu stood up. "I call for a vote," he said. "Should humanity pay the tribute demanded by the Galactic Council?" The vote was unanimous. Every single representative voted no. Not one person was willing to accept the Council's terms. President Minu looked around the chamber at the faces of humanity's leaders. "Then we are agreed," he said. "Ambassador, please inform the Council that humanity respectfully declines their demand. We will remain in the Council as equals, or we will not remain at all." Up on the Indomitable, Commander received a coded message. She read it twice to make sure she understood correctly. Then she called her senior officers together. "New orders," she said. "We're going to war." Commander looked at the orders on her screen one more time. They were clear and direct. "Mobilize the entire United Human Navy. Prepare for conflict." She felt her heart beating faster, but her hands were steady as she began issuing commands. What the Galactic Council didn't know was that humanity had been preparing for this moment since the day they joined. The 15 years of membership hadn't been wasted. Humans had watched, learned, and planned. Admiral was in charge of the overall military strategy. He stood in the command center deep inside Earth's moon, watching dozens of screens at once. Each screen showed a different part of human space. Ships were moving into position. Weapons were being loaded. Soldiers were saying goodbye to their families. Pressed a button and spoke into his communicator. "Execute Operation Reveal," he said quietly. All across the solar system, things started to change. Ships that had been hidden for years began to move. In the belt, far beyond Pluto, massive structures that looked like asteroids suddenly opened up. They weren't asteroids at all. They were shipyards, and they had been building warships for over a decade. The Galactic Council thought humanity had about 50 ships. That's what they had seen during the admission ceremony 15 years ago. What they didn't know was that humanity had been building ships in secret ever since. Hidden factories in the cloud, underground construction facilities on dozens of moons and asteroids, automated shipyards that built vessels piece by piece, then assembled them in the darkness between stars. Now those ships came home. There were 300 of them. Destroyers, cruisers, carriers, and even a few massive battleships that were bigger than anything the Council had seen humans build before. They moved through space like a silent metal flood, converging on Earth from every direction. Doctor was waiting for Admiral when he arrived at the weapons research facility. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and hands that were always moving. She had been in charge of developing new weapons for the human military for 8 years. Now it was time to show what she had created. "Come with me," she said, leading through a series of security checkpoints. They went deep underground, past guards with heavy weapons, past doors that required retinal scans and DNA verification. Finally, they reached a massive chamber filled with equipment. "The Council has been using the same weapons technology for thousands of years," explained, walking between rows of machinery. "Energy shields, plasma cannons, particle beams. They work well, and they've never had a reason to change. But we've been studying their systems for 15 years, and we found weaknesses." She stopped at a large device that looked like a massive cannon. "This is she said. "It uses electromagnetic force to fire a solid projectile at incredible speed. No plasma, no energy beam, just a chunk of metal moving at a fraction of the speed of light." "Examine the weapon carefully. Why would that be better?" "Because their shields are designed to disperse energy," explained. "They spread out the heat and force of energy weapons across the entire shield surface. But a solid projectile is different. It hits one point with all its force concentrated there. The shields can't disperse kinetic energy the same way. They get overwhelmed." She led him to another area where technicians were working on missiles. "We've also developed nuclear-pumped X-ray lasers," she said. "The missile gets close to an enemy ship and detonates. The nuclear explosion pumps energy into laser rods that fire in all directions for a fraction of a second before being destroyed. The radiation goes right through their shields." Was impressed. "What else?" Smiled. "Quantum encrypted communications that they can't intercept. AI-assisted targeting systems that can calculate firing solutions faster than any organic brain. Stealth coding that absorbs their sensors. And drones, Admiral. Thousands and thousands of combat drones that can be controlled by a single ship." "Can we win?" asked quietly. Smile faded. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but we can make them bleed." Meanwhile, back at Gateway Station, Ambassador was preparing to deliver humanity's answer. The main council chamber was enormous, with space for representatives from hundreds of species. Today it was packed. Everyone had heard rumors that the humans were going to respond to the tribute demand. Walked to the center of the chamber. He was wearing a simple black suit, and he carried no notes or data pads. High Assessor sat in the high seat, looking down at him with those black eyes. Around the chamber, hundreds of aliens watched in silence. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," began, his voice clear and strong. "I come before you today with my species' response to your tribute demand." He paused, looking around at all the different alien faces. Some looked curious, some looked bored, some looked hungry like predators watching prey. "Humanity declines," said simply. The chamber exploded with noise. Aliens were shouting in dozens of languages. The translation system struggled to keep up, raised her hand, and slowly the noise died down. "You understand what this means?" she asked coldly. "Yes," replied. "It means we will remain in this council as equals, with the same rights and responsibilities as any other member, or we will not remain at all. But we will not become vassals. We will not pay tribute, and we will not surrender our people to your integration programs." General, the military commander of the Empire, stood up. He was even bigger than, with armor that seemed to be part of his body. "This is unacceptable," he said, his voice like gravel. "No species has ever refused tribute and survived. You have 7 days to reconsider. After that, we will teach you the same lesson we have taught to others who forgot their place." Several species that had seemed friendly to humanity remained silent. The Trill said nothing. The water beings called Meridians looked away. The crystalline dimmed their lights. They had all seen this before. They knew how it ended. Bowed slightly. 7 days then, he said, and walked out of the chamber. On the human ships, officers were briefing their crews. Captain stood in the hangar bay of her destroyer, looking at the 200 men and women under her command. They were young, most of them. They had joined the Navy to explore the galaxy, not to fight a war. But now war had found them anyway. "I won't lie to you," said. "This is going to be bad. The Council has thousands of ships. They've been fighting wars for longer than our species has existed. But they've never fought us before. They don't know what we're capable of. They think we're weak because we're young. They're about to learn differently." Back on Earth, President Minu was preparing to address the planet. Every screen in every home was tuned to the broadcast. 8 billion people waited to hear what their leader would say. Minu looked tired. He had been in meetings for days, barely sleeping, but his voice was firm when he spoke. "My fellow humans," he began, "today I must tell you that we face our greatest challenge since we left Earth and ventured into space. The Galactic Council has demanded tribute from us. They want our resources, our labor, and our people. They want to take who we are and change us into something that serves them." He paused, letting that sink in. "We have refused their demand. This means that we will likely face war. The Council has a military force beyond anything we can match in numbers, but numbers aren't everything. Throughout our history, humanity has faced extinction many times. We survived ice ages. We survived plagues. We survived wars that nearly destroyed our world. And we survived because we never gave up, because we stood together, because we refused to accept that might makes right. So now we face this challenge the same way, together. Every human on every world in every station, we are one species. And we will not bow to tyranny no matter how old it is, no matter how powerful it seems. We will stand. And if we must fight, we will fight. Not for conquest, not for glory, but for the simple right to be free." The broadcast ended. Across Earth and all the colony worlds, people had tears in their eyes. They were afraid, but they were also proud. They were human, and humans didn't surrender. The 7 days passed quickly. On the 8th day, 500 warships appeared at the edge of the solar system. They came out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, a massive wall of metal and energy that stretched across space. At the center was the Eternal Judgment, the flagship of General himself. The Council fleet was impressive. Ships from 20 different species all working together. Some were sleek and elegant, built by species that valued beauty even in war. Others were brutal and ugly, covered in weapons and armor, but all of them were powerful. This was the largest punitive fleet the Council had deployed in 3 centuries. General sat in his command chair, watching the displays. His sensors showed the human home world ahead, that small blue planet circling an ordinary yellow star. Around it, he could see human ships, maybe 50 of them, clustered near Earth in a defensive formation. He felt something close to pity. They were going to try to fight. "Send them the final demand," he ordered. His communications officer transmitted the message. "Surrender now or be destroyed." Simple and clear. Commander received the message on the Indomitable. She was in the asteroid belt, not near Earth at all. Around her ship, 200 other human vessels waited silently. They had been hiding among the asteroids for days, their stealth coating making them nearly invisible to Council sensors. She read the demand and smiled grimly. Then she opened a channel to all human ships. "This is Commander to all vessels. You know your targets. You know the plan. When they realize we're not where they expect us to be, they're going to be confused. That confusion is our advantage. Make every shot count, for Earth, for humanity." 300 voices responded, "For humanity." The Council fleet began moving toward Earth. They expected the human ships near the planet to either run or surrender. Instead, something strange happened. The human ships near Earth suddenly broke formation and scattered. They weren't running toward the outer system. They were running deeper into the solar system, toward the sun. General was confused. "What are they doing?" he asked his tactical officer. "Unknown, sir. They appear to be retreating toward their star." "Then we've won," said. "Pursuit formation. Destroy them before they can escape into the sun's gravity well." The Council fleet changed formation and accelerated. They were moving fast now, eager to catch the fleeing humans. They passed through the orbital path of Mars. They passed through the asteroid belt. And that's when everything went wrong. The asteroids opened fire. Hundreds of them. Thousands of them. Rocks that had seemed dead and ordinary suddenly lit up with weapons fire. That had been carefully hidden fired solid projectiles at incredible speed. The projectiles were too fast to dodge and too solid to disperse with energy shields. 3 Council cruisers lost their shields in the first volley. 2 more were hit directly, their hulls torn open by kinetic force. Air and atmosphere vented into space along with bodies. "All ships, emergency defense pattern," shouted. But the asteroids weren't the only problem. Now the real human fleet appeared from hiding. 200 ships emerged from behind large asteroids, from inside craters, from positions they had held for days. They fired missiles and then immediately moved to new positions. Doctor's innovations were devastating. Human missiles didn't follow straight paths like Council missiles did. They jinked and weaved, using tiny thrusters to dodge defensive fire. When they got close, they detonated and nuclear-pumped X-ray lasers fired in all directions. The radiation went right through shields, burning into ship hulls, destroying electronics, killing crew members. Captain led a squadron of destroyers against a group of Council frigates. Her ships moved in perfect coordination, each one linked to the others through quantum-encrypted communications. The Council ships tried to jam their signals, but it was impossible to jam quantum encryption. Squadron attacked from 4 directions at once, overwhelming the frigate's defenses. The Council fleet tried to adapt. They broke into smaller groups trying to concentrate fire on individual human ships, but the humans wouldn't stand still and fight. They would fire, then disappear behind asteroids. They would attack from one direction, then circle around and attack from another. It was frustrating and confusing. General realized something disturbing. These humans fought like they had been doing it for a long time. Every maneuver was practiced. Every attack was coordinated. They weren't learning how to fight. They already knew, and they were good at it. A human ship called the Relentless came at the Eternal Judgment with 19 other ships. They attacked from different angles, firing everything they had at the flagship's communication array. Shields held, but the array was damaged. Suddenly, it was harder to coordinate his fleet. Orders were delayed. Ships couldn't communicate properly. The battle went on for 3 days. It wasn't like the fast space battles shown in entertainment programs. Real battles were long and exhausting. Ships would fire, retreat, repair, and attack again. Crews worked without sleep, surviving on stimulants and adrenaline. The asteroid belt became a graveyard of shattered ships and frozen bodies. Commander was everywhere, moving her ship from fight to fight, helping wherever the line was weakest. She watched young officers make life and death decisions. She saw ships she had served on destroyed in flashes of light. She heard the screams on the communication channels when hulls were breached and people died in the vacuum. But slowly, impossibly, the humans were winning. It wasn't because they had better ships. They didn't. A Council dreadnought could destroy a human cruiser in a straight fight, but the humans never fought straight. They used the asteroids for cover. They used the sun's gravity to slingshot around at incredible speeds. They used every dirty trick they had learned in thousands of years of human warfare. Most importantly, they used coordination. Every human ship knew where every other human ship was. They fought as one unified force, while the Council fleet was made up of different species with different tactics and different languages. The Council ships were stronger individually, but weaker as a group. Admiral watched from the command center on the moon. He saw the tactical display showing the battle in real time. Green dots for human ships, red dots for Council ships. There were so many more red dots than green, but the red dots kept disappearing. On the 3rd day, something broke in the Council fleet. Maybe it was fatigue. Maybe it was the realization that they weren't fighting primitives. Maybe it was just fear. But ships started withdrawing without orders. First a few, then more. Species that had been forced to join the fleet decided this wasn't their fight. General tried to hold his fleet together, but it was falling apart. He had lost 87 ships, 87, against a species that wasn't supposed to be able to fight at all. His own casualties were mounting. The eternal judgment had been hit multiple times. Systems were failing. His crew was exhausted. Finally, he gave the order to retreat. The Council fleet, jumping back into faster-than-light travel and disappearing. They left their dead behind, floating in the asteroid belt alongside the human ships that had fallen. Commander stood on the bridge of the Indomitable looking at the aftermath. The ship was damaged. They had lost 3 engines and their main communications array was destroyed. But they were alive. Around her, crew members were crying, hugging each other, celebrating. They had won. But didn't feel like celebrating. She had lost 12 ships. Thousands of people were dead. She walked to the memorial wall in the ship's chapel and started adding names. There were so many names, too many. Captain found her there hours later. "We did it," said quietly. "We actually did it. We beat them." Kept writing names. "We beat one fleet," she said. "They have hundreds more, and now they're going to be angry." Back on Earth, people were celebrating in the streets. They didn't know about the cost. They just knew that humanity had faced the Galactic Council's military and survived. President Minu watched the celebrations from his office window. He was happy they had won, but he knew this was just the beginning. Ambassador was receiving messages from dozens of alien species. Secret messages, encrypted and carefully worded. They all said the same thing. The Council had ruled through fear for 50,000 years. Now that fear was broken. Species across the galaxy had watched the battle. They had seen the mighty Council fleet retreat. And they were starting to ask themselves dangerous questions. News traveled fast across the galaxy. Every species had their own version of the internet, their own way of sharing information. Within days, everyone knew what had happened. Humanity, the young species that had joined the Council only 15 years ago, had defeated a Council enforcement fleet. The recordings were everywhere, ships exploding. The Council fleet retreating. It was unbelievable. On the Trill, Hive leader Shakara watched the recordings for the 10th time. The Trill were beings who thought and acted as a collective. They had been part of the Council for 8,000 years. For all that time, they had paid tribute without question. It was just the way things were. The strong ruled and the weak obeyed. But watching the humans fight, something stirred in the Trill collective memory. They hadn't always been peaceful. Thousands of years ago, before the Council came, the Trill had been warriors. They had fought among themselves, hive against hive, in great wars that reshaped their planet. Then the Council arrived with their massive fleets and gave the Trill a choice. Submit or die. The Trill had submitted. Now Shakara opened the ancient archives that no one had looked at in centuries. She found battle plans, weapon designs, warrior training methods. All forgotten, buried under layers of peaceful civilization. She wondered if it was time to remember. Ambassador was overwhelmed with messages. His communication system was flooded with requests for secret meetings. The Meridians wanted to talk, so did even some of the smaller client species were reaching out. They all wanted to know the same thing. How did humanity do it? How did they stand up to the Council? Worked with Trade Minister to respond carefully. They couldn't openly encourage rebellion. That would unite the entire Council against humanity, and the next fleet would be much larger. Instead, they shared information in subtle ways. They talked about human history, about how Earth's nations had fought for independence against empires. They shared technical information disguised as cultural exchanges. They planted seeds and let them grow. Discovered something interesting in the Council's trade records. The tributary system wasn't just about resources. It was about control. Species that paid tribute became dependent on the Council for technology, for trade routes, for protection. Over time, they forgot how to be independent. They forgot they had ever been anything else. "It's brilliant in a horrible way," explained to President Minu during a secure call. "They don't just conquer species, they make them need to be conquered. After a few generations, the tribute seems normal, natural, just the way things are." President Minu was preparing another speech. This one wouldn't be for humans. It would be transmitted to the entire Galactic Council, to every member species. He had to be very careful with his words. Too aggressive and he would provoke another attack. Too weak and the momentum would be lost. He stood in front of the cameras in the presidential office. Behind him, through the window, Earth turned slowly in space. He took a deep breath and began. "To all species of the Galactic Council, I speak not as a conqueror but as a fellow traveler among the stars. Humanity did not seek conflict with the Council. We came to the galaxy in peace, hopping to learn, to trade, to share in the wonders of civilizations far older than our own." He paused, letting the translation systems catch up. "But we discovered that the Council is not what we thought it was. It is not a partnership of equals but a hierarchy of masters and servants. Some species rule and others obey. We were told this was natural, necessary, the only way to maintain peace. But we know from our own history that peace built on oppression is no peace at all. Humanity did not want to fight. We were forced to defend ourselves. And in defending ourselves, we discovered that the Council's power rests not on justice or wisdom but on fear. For 50,000 years, you have been told that resistance is impossible. We have shown that this is not true. We do not ask you to follow our example. Every species must make their own choices. But we do ask you to question, to think, to consider whether the Council serves you or whether you serve the Council. And if you decide that you deserve better, know that you are not alone. Humanity will stand with any species that seeks to be free." The speech ended. Across the galaxy, reactions were immediate and divided. Some species praised humanity's courage. Others called them dangerous revolutionaries. But everyone was talking about it. And that was what mattered. On Earth, Admiral was not celebrating. He was in meetings with his senior officers, looking at intelligence reports. The Empire was mobilizing. This wasn't going to be another enforcement fleet. This was going to be a full military response. Reports suggested thousands of ships were being assembled. "We can't win against those numbers," said one of his officers. "Not in a direct fight." Knew he was right. The first battle had been won through surprise and innovation, but the Council would adapt. They would study human tactics. They would develop countermeasures. The next battle would be much harder. Commander was dealing with the aftermath of the first battle. The Indomitable was in dock, being repaired. She visited the wounded in the medical stations. Young men and women with burns, broken bones, missing limbs. They had survived, but they would carry the scars forever. One young officer, his name was, had lost both his parents in the battle. They had been serving on the destroyer Valiant when it was destroyed. He was only 19 years old, and now he was an orphan. Sat with him in the hospital room, not knowing what to say. "Was it worth it?" asked her quietly. "My parents died for what? So we could fight a war we can't win." Thought carefully before answering. "Your parents died so that you could live free," she said. "So that humanity wouldn't become servants. Maybe we can't win. Maybe the next fleet will destroy us, but at least we stood up. At least we tried. That matters." Looked out the window at Earth. "I want to fight," he said. "When the next fleet comes, I want to be there." "You will be," promised. Meanwhile, something unexpected was happening. The crystalline species sent an encrypted message directly to President Minu. There were strange beings, living creatures made of something like living crystal. They communicated through light pulses, and they had been part of the Council for 12,000 years. Their message was brief but shocking. They had discovered something in the ancient Council archives, something humanity needed to know. The Empire's power didn't come just from military strength. It came from their control of the network. There were the pathways through space that allowed faster-than-light travel. Without them, traveling between stars would take centuries. They had built the network 50,000 years ago, using technology that no one else understood. More importantly, they controlled the navigation codes. Every ship in the galaxy needed those codes to use the. Without them, you couldn't travel faster than light. This changed everything. It meant they didn't just control the galaxy militarily. They controlled movement itself. Any species that them could be cut off from the network, trapped in their own star system forever. President Minu called an emergency meeting of his advisors. Doctor, Admiral, Commander, Ambassador, and Trade Minister all gathered in the secure conference room. "If they control we've already lost," said bluntly. "They can cut us off whenever they want. We'll be trapped in our own system." "Not if we break their control," said. "They sent us technical data. The system is old, 50,000 years old. It's built on outdated code with security vulnerabilities that modern quantum computing might be able to exploit." "Can we crack it?" Minu asked. Was quiet for a moment. "Maybe," she said, "if we work with the scientists who sent this data, if we dedicate every computer we have to the problem, if we get lucky. Maybe." "How long?" "Months, maybe a year." "We don't have a year," said. "Intelligence suggests they will launch their next attack within 3 months." The room fell silent. Everyone was thinking the same thing. They were out of time. They had won one battle, but they were going to lose the war. Then Trade Minister spoke up. She had been quiet throughout the meeting, but now she had an idea. "What if we don't wait for them to attack?" she said. "What if we take the fight to them?" Everyone looked at her. "Explain," Minu said. "The control from a central network hub on their home world," said. "If we could get a team there, if we could access that hub directly, we might be able to crack their system much faster. Days instead of months." "That's suicide," said. "The home world is the most heavily defended planet in the galaxy." "Maybe," said. "But it's also the last place they would expect us to attack, and if we succeed, we could free the entire galaxy." The room was silent again. It was an insane plan. The chances of success were almost zero, but it was the only plan they had. 3 months after the Battle of Saul, Emperor of the Empire stood on the bridge of his personal flagship. He was ancient even by standards. He had ruled the empire for 2,000 years, maintaining the council system that his ancestors had built. No one had ever challenged his authority before. No one had dared. Now these humans, these children who had barely learned to walk among the stars, had humiliated his fleet. Reports said that 47 species had stopped paying tribute. The Trill had declared independence. The Meridians had closed their worlds to council ships. Dozens of minor species were forming defense pacts. The entire galaxy was falling apart. Had assembled 5,000 warships. Every species in the council had been ordered to contribute. This was the largest military force in recorded history. It would take months to reach the human home world, but when it arrived, humanity would cease to exist. They would be an example to every other species that thought about rebellion. But the galaxy was changing faster than realized. On Earth, Captain was preparing for the most dangerous mission of her life. She stood in the hangar bay of a new ship, one that had been built specifically for this operation. It was smaller than a destroyer, with experimental stealth systems and the fastest engines humanity had ever built. It was called the Shadow. With her were 19 other volunteers. Each one had been told the odds. Each one had been given the chance to decline. None of them had. They included scientists, hackers, soldiers, and one very special person. A scientist named Brightness and Void who had defected to humanity and knew the network systems better than anyone alive. Admiral gave them their final briefing. "Your mission is to reach the home world, infiltrate their network center, and deploy the quantum virus that will rewrite the access codes. If you succeed, every species in the galaxy will have free access to the monopoly will end. If you fail, You will almost certainly die, and humanity will face the Council fleet alone. Young officer was among the volunteers. He had recovered from his injuries and insisted on being included. Commander had tried to talk him out of it, but he was determined. "My parents died defending Earth," he had said. "Let me help free the galaxy." The Shadow launched quietly, slipping away from Earth while everyone's attention was on the approaching Council fleet. It would take weeks to reach the home world, traveling through little-used and avoiding all contact with other ships. While the strike team traveled, humanity prepared its defenses. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier was ready. Commander commanded the fleet from the repaired Indomitable. She knew they couldn't win a direct fight against 5,000 ships, but they could buy time. That's all the strike team needed. Time. President Minu addressed the human species one more time. "In the next few days, we will face the largest military force ever assembled," he said. "The odds are against us. The Council expects us to surrender or be destroyed, but they have forgotten something important. Humanity has always faced impossible odds, and somehow we always survive." The Shadow reached the home world after 3 weeks of silent running. The planet was enormous, twice the size of Earth, with massive cities and orbital stations. Captain studied the defenses through her sensors. There were hundreds of warships in orbit, defense satellites everywhere, energy shields protecting the major cities. It looked impossible. But Brightness and Void had a plan. "The network center is underground," the scientist explained through translated light pulses. "It is old, built when the first created the system 50,000 years ago. Security has been updated over time, but the basic structure remains. There is a maintenance entrance that is rarely used." They waited for the shift change at the network center. In the darkness of the night, the Shadow descended through the atmosphere, using its stealth coating to avoid detection. They landed in a forest far from any city, then traveled overland in a stolen ground vehicle. The maintenance entrance was guarded by 2 soldiers, and another soldier, a woman named, took them out quietly. The team moved inside, following Brightness and Void's directions through tunnels that went deep underground. Alarms started going off when they were halfway to the network center. Someone had found the unconscious guards. Captain knew they had minutes at most. "Run," she ordered. They ran through the tunnels, fighting security forces when they had to. 3 team members died in those tunnels, then 5, then 7, but they kept moving forward, getting closer to the network center. At the Sol system, the Council fleet arrived. 5,000 warships emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. Emperor broadcast his final demand: "Surrender now, or every human world would be destroyed." Commander responded with 2 words: "Come and try." The second battle of Sol began. This time, the humans weren't hiding in the asteroid belt. They met the Council fleet head-on, fighting with everything they had. It was hopeless. The Council had too many ships, but every minute the human fleet held out was another minute for Captain's team. In the network center, the remaining team members fought their way to the main computer core. Brightness and Void began working on the quantum virus while the others defended the entrance. Was manning the door, firing his weapon at wave after wave of soldiers. "How long?" Captain shouted over the sounds of weapons fire. 2 minutes, Brightness and Void replied. They didn't have 2 minutes. They were bringing up heavy weapons. The door wouldn't hold much longer. Captain made a decision. "Everyone but Brightness and Void fall back to the ship. I'll stay and buy time." "Captain, no," shouted. "That's an order, officer. Go." The team retreated, leaving Captain alone at the door. She had 2 weapons and enough ammunition for maybe 1 minute of fighting. She started firing, taking down soldiers one after another. They kept coming. She kept firing. Her weapons overheated. She kept firing. "Done," Brightness and Void announced. The virus was deployed. Throughout the galaxy, every ship's navigation system received new access codes that were now open to everyone. Weapons finally failed. She had no more ammunition. Soldiers poured through the door. She stood up straight, facing them. "For humanity," she said quietly. In the Sol system, something impossible happened. Ships from the Council fleet started to break away. The Trill contingent received the new navigation codes and realized they were free. They no longer needed the Council's permission to travel. They from the battle. The Meridian ships followed. Then dozens of other species. Emperor watched his fleet disintegrate. Species that had served the Empire for thousands of years were leaving. The foundation of his power was crumbling. Without control of he was just another ruler with a military. And many species had their own militaries now. Ambassador broadcast from Gateway Station to the entire galaxy. He proposed a new system, a galactic assembly where every species had an equal vote, where decisions were made through cooperation, not force, where they belonged to everyone. The fighting in the Sol system stopped. Remaining ships, the Emperor had a choice. Continue a war he could no longer win or accept a new order. Trade Minister had prepared for this moment. She contacted economic ministers directly, explaining how a free galaxy would benefit everyone. Open meant expanded trade. Technology sharing meant faster innovation. Peace was more profitable than empire. It took weeks of negotiation. They argued, threatened, pleaded. But eventually, even Emperor had to admit reality. The old order was dead. He agreed to a ceasefire and joined the talks for creating the new Galactic Assembly. The Shadow made it back to Earth with 8 survivors. Captain was not among them. Neither were 12 other team members. They had given their lives to free the galaxy, carried their names with him, adding them to his parents on the list of people he would never forget. The first session of the Galactic Assembly convened 6 months later. Over 900 species sent representatives. They came too, no longer rulers but participants. Emperor's empire still existed, but it was one nation among many now. Commander, now promoted to Fleet Admiral, stood on the bridge of the Indomitable as it patrolled the newly free. Ships from hundreds of species traveled freely, trading, exploring, meeting. This was what the galaxy should have been all along. President Minu gave the opening address to the Galactic Assembly. He spoke about humanity's journey to the stars, expecting to find wonders and instead finding tyranny. He spoke about the cost of freedom, the names on the memorial walls, the families who had lost loved ones. He spoke about Captain and her team, who had given everything so that others could be free. For 50,000 years, the Council ruled through fear, Minu said. They taught civilizations that freedom was impossible, that the strong would always dominate the weak, that this was simply the way of things. Humanity learned differently. Throughout our history, we have fought against tyranny in all its forms. We have learned that freedom is not given but taken, not inherited but earned, not a gift but a right. He looked around at the assembled representatives, seeing species from every corner of the galaxy. We did not come to your world seeking conquest. We did not destroy the Council to build our own empire. We fought because we believe that no species should rule another. That strength without justice is oppression. That the galaxy deserves better than 50,000 years of fear. Today marks a new beginning. The Galactic Assembly will not be perfect. We will argue, disagree, and struggle to find common ground. But we will do so as equals. No species will pay tribute to another. No one will be forced to surrender their people or their resources. We will build something better together, or we will fail together, but we will be free. The Assembly voted to make the network a common resource, free for all species. They established rules for peaceful conflict resolution. They created a voluntary defense pact where species could request help but not demand it. Most importantly, they recognized that every species had the right to self-determination. Ambassador watched from Gateway Station, now renamed Unity Station, as ships from 1,000 worlds came and went. Humanity had been asked to pay tribute and had responded not with submission or simple refusal, but with a vision of what the galaxy could be. They had fought not just for themselves but for everyone. On Earth, memorial ceremonies were held for the fallen. Captain's name was engraved in stone alongside thousands of others who had died in the two battles and the mission to the home world. Families mourned. Children grew up hearing stories of parents they would never meet. The cost of freedom was high, but it was worth it. Across the galaxy, species that had forgotten they could be free were remembering. Ancient warrior traditions were revived. Cultural practices that had been suppressed were celebrated again. Economies that had been drained by tribute began to recover. Technology that had been hoarded by the Council was shared freely. Young officer stood at the memorial wall on the Indomitable looking at three names. His mother, his father, Captain, "We did it," he said quietly. "The galaxy is free. I hope you're proud." Fleet Admiral found him there. "They would be," she said. "Your parents fought to protect Earth. Captain fought to free the galaxy, and you helped make it happen. That legacy will last forever." Wiped his eyes. "What happens now?" Smiled. "Now we explore, we learn, we build. We do all the things we came to the stars to do. The fighting is over. Now comes the harder part, making sure it stays that way." In his palace on the home world, Emperor looked out at the stars. His empire was gone. The system his ancestors had built was destroyed. But strangely, he felt almost relieved. 50,000 years of ruling through fear, of maintaining order through force, of endless tribute and constant threat. It had been exhausting. Perhaps these humans were right. Perhaps there was a better way. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly the point. Humanity had come to the stars as the youngest species, the members of an ancient order. They had been demanded tribute and responded with defiance. They had faced impossible odds and survived. Most importantly, they had taught the galaxy an old lesson that civilizations 50,000 years old had forgotten. That freedom matters, that dignity matters, that every species, no matter how young or small, deserves to chart their own course among the stars. The age of the Galactic Council was over. The age of the Galactic Assembly had begun. And humanity, having left Earth to explore the universe, discovered they had one more gift to give.